walls.
Afghanistan's Hindu Kush is as far away as you can get from Alabama.
I think a lot of people just really don't realize the level of commitment that the Guard has to Afghanistan.
Mom.
We've had a couple of soldiers that have died here, and it got a little play, but I mean, these guys are dedicated and really care about their country and their military job.
One is, just to be friendly, and number two is especially the guys sitting on the side of the road, if they're waving at you, they're not holding a gun.
We do have a lot of law enforcement types. We have doctors, dentists, nurses.
We've got carpenters, plumbers, lawyers. We bring a fairly high level skill set in addition to the military side of the house.
Colonel Gregg is the commander of the Alabama National Guard's 20th Special Forces Group, weekend warriors, who were activated in August and sent here to central Afghanistan in September.
Contact right, contact right.
Tell me what you do in the real world, Dan.
I'm a tax attorney for the government.
I work for a software company in the real world, so it's a little bit different.
And so is Sergeant First Class John's salary. He has taken a 70% pay cut, and like the majority of his unit, his employer does not have a compensating pay program.
We've had to make some pretty serious adjustments. Sold our house that we built 7 years ago. My wife took a leave of absence from her job, and they're living in an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment, until I get back and we decide what to do.
You ever driven this slow before?
Yeah, except you're stuck in rush hour in Atlanta.
Sergeant First Class Todd, a hospital physician's assistant, and his teammates are a long way from home, and the traditional concept of 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks of summer soldiers. The team's active duty deployment could last a year, with the possibility of a 1-year extension.
I don't really want to be here, but we are here. We've got no choice to be here. I'm here, so let's do the job, get it done, and then go home.
The U.S. has offered to provide the UN inspectors with aerial...
When not on patrol, this former Taliban hospital and 60s hippie retreat serves as their command post, barracks, recreation center, and field hospital.
Does teeth hurt or anything like that?
The special forces in Afghanistan have had to adapt their war-fighting techniques and special operations to the local environment and resources, from relying on horses for high-altitude patrols to convincing local warlords to give up their local rivalries.
We're expected to be able to, at 1 minute, go up and have tea with the elders of a village, and get the call the next minute to suit up and go do the other thing.
And what would the other thing be?
The whole, swift, silent, deadly plan a mission and execute it.
While surveying a damaged bridge they hope to replace before the spring floods, a shot echoed off the canyon walls.
We just heard a gunshot close to my area. With these mountains here, it makes it hard to distinguish exactly where it was coming from, but it's not unusual to hear, gunshots when traveling.
The whole time we're here, I've been leery because I know this is the perfect spot for a sniper. If I was going to be a sniper, there's a million places I could pick right in here. We're probably basically okay, but we just want to be safe, be careful. It's still a war zone.
That NK circle there is like a huge blasting cap.
Discovering and destroying hidden weapons caches has been one of the more sensitive and dangerous issues they've had to deal with.
Fused in, if it's not fused, I pack it with C4 and a usually not, and it just detonates.
If it goes peaceful, we can walk these guys right here out, and our AMF guys can hold them. If it's not, if we do start shooting, where's Chuck? I don't want those guys coming in there. That would just get more confusing. Yeah. And plus, quite frankly, I may get shot by one of them.
After one of their patrols discovered a large cache of weapons guarded by local militia of questionable origin, the team had to plan a strategic recovery operation that wouldn't upset the delicate peace in the area.
We're going to drive all the way up, and we're going to come right here and shine the light in. Get out the doors, but we're not going to go up to the objective yet. We can come back tomorrow. We could just put eyes on it and leave it.
All right, Roger, they just got compromised. We need to head out now. Hey, listen up.
You got 6 guys inside. So the first vehicle, you know who you are. Second vehicle. I want Jim in that one. We have the guards.
When their sniper observer team watching the site was discovered, there was no time left.
We got 2 guns up here on the roof, but they're not functional.
The team would have to rely on their training to seize the weapons one way or another.
So this is where they were when you confronted them?
They came out of this room and we had security on the hallway.
Their initial plan for surprising and confronting the guards with overwhelming power worked.
Over here next.
The owner of the weapons surrendered them without shots fired.
Just another day in Afghanistan.
In central Afghanistan, this is Mike Saray reporting for Nightline.
The bucolic vistas of southern Oregon, moist and green and rural, are a world away from the rugged, dry mountains of Afghanistan or the parched sands of Egypt's Sinai Desert.
The heat initially was staggering for people from Oregon. And when we arrived in midsummer, it was touching between 110 and 115 routinely.
But for the 600-plus National Guard troops from Oregon now serving in those remote places, the climate is the least of their adjustments.
Well, I've been in the Guard a long time, and I think this is undoubtedly the most stressful period of time, basically because of the unknown.
As part of the largest mobilization of Oregon Guard troops since World War II, their civilian lives have been drastically disrupted.
It isn't necessarily a lack of willingness to fulfill our obligation. It's a matter of what's tomorrow or what's 6 months from now, and when can I get back to my school, or when can I get back to my employer, when can I get back to my community and live somewhat of a normal life.
There are currently 60,000 of these so-called citizen soldiers on duty all over the world, primarily at posts vacated by active duty troops now deployed in trouble spots. National Guard troops have sometimes been disparaged as weekend warriors because their service time is typically limited.
1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and be able to go to college. That's what I was looking at the time.
But that old stereotype is changing. The National Guard troops from Oregon departed early this year knowing that their overseas deployment would last more than 6 months. It is now 8 months and counting. When Sergeant John Esch of Oregon's 1042nd Air Ambulance Company was preparing to leave, his sons broke from the crowd for one last hug.
They just wanted one last goodbye. They didn't know when they'd see him again. I know it was really emotional for my husband.
A lot of emotions. A lot of emotions thinking about the future, what it holds, what's going to happen at home.
Sergeant Esch is part of an air ambulance crew in Afghanistan. Back in Salem, Suzanne Esch had to give up her nursing job so she could care for their 9-year-old boy and 4-year-old twins. She leads a support group for wives and speaks at local schools.
So how many people here know someone who's been in the military? Wow.
And she supports her husband's commitment to his country. Even so, she worries.
I'd heard that in one of the locations, every time they flew, they were shot at. Every time.
Long deployments take a toll on the absent fathers as well.
That's the hard part.
Captain Tom Lingle flies helicopters with Sergeant Esch.
If you look at the entire deployment, up probably about a year, and that's definitely the hard part.
Lingle's wife, Denise, is also raising 3 children, including a set of twins. As she watched our videotaped interview of her husband in Afghanistan, she expressed both surprise.
His mustache jumped out at me. I've never seen him in a mustache.
And sadness.
Just empty and lonely. I'm not alone. I'm never alone, but it's lonely.
Denise Lingle is hardly a whiner. In fact, she too is in the National Guard. But her mixed feelings about long deployments are shared by hundreds of families in Southern Oregon. The 186th Infantry Regiment's 1st Battalion draws its forces from communities such as Ashland, Medford, and Grants Pass. Support of the family is essential if citizen soldiers are to keep on volunteering and re-enlisting.
If you lose the family, you're going to lose the soldier airman.
And then there are all those small-town employers who are losing valued workers for almost a year.
In the future, if they deem that this service is too detrimental to the long-term productivity of this individual, whether they have to legally take them back is one thing. It's how do they take them back and what's their future in that organization.
Although federal law requires civilian employers to keep jobs open for reservists, there's no law that requires them to keep paying salaries or insurance premiums for that matter. Even so, more than 200 companies do just that, mostly large corporations that can afford to do so. Starbucks is one company that keeps up the payments on health care to people like Jenny Gunter, a Starbucks supervisor from Ashland, now stationed in the Sinai.
And when I volunteered, they were like, yeah, go ahead and do it, and when you get back, you're more than welcome here.
And Jenny is missed there as well.
People are still asking about her, wanting to know if she's keeping in touch and how she's doing in Egypt. And yeah, it's a small community. She means a lot to a lot of people here in town.
Duty in the Sinai Desert can be long, hot, and often boring. But Jenny doesn't look at it that way.
I'm serving my country, and there's people who have served before me who allowed me to have the freedom that I have today.
Every National Guard member we spoke with echoed those sentiments. Their families back home voiced support as well. But they too are making an enormous sacrifice for their country.
When he left, the immediate thought in my mind is, will I see him again? Every time he calls, will I hear from him again? Every time I get an email, is this the last one? Will something horrible happen?
More of a sacrifice from this end. I don't have him here. He does not get to see his children this year grow up and walk and, develop. We do everything together. He's my best friend. I've lost my friend.
If you want to know about the toll that long deployments take on families, just ask Sergeant Ken Anderson. He joined the Oregon National Guard after leaving active duty in the Army.
I chose to get out where I could spend more time with my kids instead of coming home from deployments and my kids looking at me like, who are you?
And so he was understandably stunned when, as a guardsman, he was deployed to the Sinai for almost a year.
It was the last thing I was actually expecting, to be honest with you.
And the last thing his family was expecting. Anderson is the single father of 4 young children. His mother and sister offered to take the kids while he was overseas.
Well, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, but we need to do this. We didn't give it any second thoughts. We just immediately started making plans for how we could make room for all the kids.
I hate calling home. I'll call home and talk to each one of the kids, one at a time, one right after another. And my oldest one, Grace, she always gives that pause. I'm like going, oh, crud, here it comes. Dad, what, Grace? When are you coming home? That hurts.
He has been gone very long and we're tired of waiting.
Tired of waiting for him to come home. All the children are looking forward to a more settled lifestyle.
Every time the school's over, we go to a different school. We always change different schools and all that.
How's that? Do you wish that weren't true?
I don't like it.
You'd like to stay in one school?
Yeah.
Because of his lengthy assignment, Anderson has missed all 4 birthdays this year.
I look at it on the bright side. There'll be other birthdays, and I will get pictures.
Pictures are often these troops' most valued possessions.
Those are my babies.
When Guardsman Cole Calicote left for the Sinai earlier this year, he had no way of knowing all he would miss out on. His wife had to undergo thyroid surgery and a cancer scare.
I wanted my husband home.
She also wanted him home to see his infant son growing up.
Yeah, it does hurt. And I do worry that he's not going to know who I am when I get home.
And then there is Ashley.
Say hi, Brownie.
Before Calicote left home, he filled out the papers to formally adopt his stepdaughter. Their day in court finally came last month.
And I'm going to sign the paper that makes your dad-in-law, as well as in your heart.
Dad couldn't be there,
Congratulations.
but at least the rest of her new family came to celebrate. National Guard Sergeant Trevor Wallace is also from Grants Pass, Oregon. His quarters in the Sinai are covered with photos of 9-month-old Jace.
He's sitting up on his own, and standing and walking and all that. It's hard to miss all that. It's not something that happens twice, if you know what I mean.
Even so, he believes his service to the country takes precedence.
If I don't make the sacrifice, first off, I can't expect other people to do it, and if you think about it, I'm doing it for him in a way.
Full-time military personnel are used to these sacrifices. But for these National Guard troops, the long separation is a jolt, and it is invariably the small things they miss the most. A toddler's first steps.
Oh, that's good.
The magic of Halloween, from donning costumes to calling on neighbors.
Trick or treat.
And sometimes the neighbors come up with treats of their own for these families.
I have a neighbor who didn't ask, but when he mows his lawn, he mows mine. I have a neighbor who helps me with the kids. She takes them once a week.
In small towns like Grants Pass, almost everybody knows somebody who's been deployed overseas. So families left behind don't have to look far for support. Most businesses here offer them discounts, and one freight company has offered to send Christmas packages overseas free of charge. The Oregon National Guard troops are scheduled to come home in January, but that could change if there is war with Iraq.
We were told if anything happened while they were gone, that they have the option to keep them for 2 years.
Ooh.
It's a long time.
Long time. Yeah. And that is now a very real worry.
For a lot of the guys, very much so, because they had planned on being gone 9 months, and that seemed very certain, and now things are different, of course.
Asking National Guard troops to pull even longer shifts could put serious strains on the willingness of these citizen soldiers to volunteer in the first place.
They believe what they're doing is right. And they know what they're doing is important. But again, I go back to what the big challenge is can we maintain that momentum?
For now, at least, no one is complaining. Not over there.
I have a job to do, and I'm going to do it.
And not over here.
I think we're just pulling our end.
And the country's not asking too much of your family.
I don't believe so, no. It's our pleasure.
Even so, a homecoming next month
Good night, baby boy.
would surely be the greatest pleasure of all. I'm Judy Muller for Nightline in Grants Pass, Oregon.